Welcome to the Reel Rematch, the podcast where we unpack Hollywood's twin films, sometimes cloned on purpose, sometimes by accident, but always in competition. Today's matchup, Jungle Fever, Madagascar versus the Wild, two animated animal adventures escaping the zoo and heading into the wild, released less than a year apart. Which one captured hearts in the concrete jungle? Which one ruled the box office savannah? And which beastly romp still stands tall as king of the animated jungle?
Hey Justin, how you going, mate?
Jeff, I'm well. How are you?
Very well, thank you, very well. Well, here we are again, ready to go. As we said last time, we're going to go a bit lighthearted because we've done a few deeper, darker films. We're going to go a little lighthearted, look some animation. We're going to look at Madagascar versus the Wild.
Jeff, can I just say, welcome to the jungle?
You can,
but I wish you did it.
Okay, that's if we're being honest. Absolutely.
Anyway, Jeff, great pod, and
I'll see you next week. Yeah. No worries. So, two animated films coming through in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, both incredibly similar. I must admit, I've seen Madagascar prior to this. Again, I've got kids. You've got kids. We've seen these films before. I had not seen The Wild prior to this. Upon watching it, I couldn't believe how close these films were together, how similar the stories are, how much they're basically set in the same story happens, and how they come together in terms of their outcomes and what the moral of the story is, right? Yeah, it was quite incredible what these two films are. But yeah, I think it was, in terms of the way we talk about what we do is we look at these twin films, look at their similarities. This is a case of two that are really close together, really very, very similar. Again, possibly not known about each other, developed independently, but some level of knowledge of each other. But then just being the same film almost, right?
I mean, it's incredible. And we have a bit of a mirror in this in terms of, Finding Nemo and Shark Tale, just in the fact that there's this, rivalry between DreamWorks and Disney.
Yeah.
And obviously Katzenberg plays an outsized role in that. And again, a real fascinating one, because this is where I think, DreamWorks were crushing it, to be honest. And, they really, showed Disney how it's done. Like they were, this wasn't just like, hey, we pipped you the post. This was, we ran circles around you. I mean, it was incredible.
And we always talk numbers, and we'll talk about that later. But in terms of the last time when we talked about Finding Nemo versus Shark Tale, it was Disney didn't just step on DreamWorks, they squashed them into the floor. This is the reverse.
Yeah.
This is a case of DreamWorks smashing Disney into the ground. So, yeah, and it happens. These stories happen. But, yeah, interesting the way it's kind of the roles change in that scenario.
Actually, if I recall correctly, though, wasn't Finding Nemo, I think Finding Nemo was Pixar pre-Disney's acquisition of them.
Yes, it was. Absolutely. And it was a Pixar film. That's true. I think Disney was just the distributor at that point. So, which actually comes into play. Something I found in my research on these was interesting, which potentially accounts for why The Wild didn't turn out to be the greatest film of all time. Was something to do with, because this is before Pixar was acquired by Disney, but at the time they had a distribution relationship and that was it. So Disney released the Pixar films, but that was coming to an end when The Wild was being created. So I think that was part of the reason what had happened there. So, yeah. But I mean, interestingly, at this time, and I know you've looked into this, it seems to be the age of animated films, digital films for kids, where anthropomorphic animals prevalent on our screens all the time. So you said you'd seen some stuff about that?
So, Jeff, this is exactly where I really wanted to zero in and do a bit of a deep dive, because this is so on theme for us and our pod that, it's really worthy of sort of further exploration. So if I can sort of read a list that I've got and just go through this, and I'll throw to you just to add a little bit more color and shape to it. Let's do a deep dive on what was happening between 2003 and 2008 as it pertains to, this almost animation glut, right? That focused on sort of like talking, emotionally expressive animals. Now, between 2003 and 2008, there were 27 movies of this type produced. Now, that's roughly one new title every 10 to 12 weeks, 4 to 5 a year over
That's
this period.
crazy.
So I'm going to read this list. This is how crazy it is. You've got Piglet's Big Movie, 2003, Finding Nemo, 2003, Brother Bear, 2003, Home in the Range, 2004, Garfield the Movie, 2004, Shark Tale, 2004, Shrek 2, 2004, Madagascar, 2005, Pooh's Heffalump Movie, 2005, Chicken Little, 2005, Valiant, 2005, The Wild, 2006, Ice Age The Meltdown, 2006, Flushed Away, 2006, Over the Hedge, 2006, Open Season, 2006, Barnyard, 2006, Happy Feet, 2006. What are you for 2006?
I was going to say, that's a lot of 2006s.
B-Movie, 2007. Alvin and Chipmunks, 2007. Kung Fu Panda, 2008. Horton Hears a Who, and he was an elephant. So that clarifies. I mean, it still captures within that. Bolt, about a dog.
Yep.
2008. The Tale of Despereaux. Some French pronunciation. I don't know how to... Despereaux?
Yep.
I don't know. 2008. Space Chimps, 2008. Madagascar, Escape to Africa, the second Madagascar, 2008. And then Surf's Up, 2007.
Wow.
I mean, like, that is an insane amount of films that,
Yes.
you know, I think, you know, kind of like, you know, live in the same corner, to be honest, right? I mean, I'll kick off in terms of, you know, why this happened and maybe some of the forces that sustained it. But I'll let you sort of, you know, really kind of go into some of that at a deeper level. But I think the outsized success of Finding Nemo in 2003, obviously coupled with the Shrek effect, right? Because that was, what did Hollywood call it? A 4-quadrant film, Jeff? That, you know, smashed the lights out. And I think it really compelled studios, or convinced them otherwise, that computer animated family-friendly comedies could yield enormous repeatable financial returns.
Yep.
I mean, Shrek 2 that came out in 2004 almost grossed $1 billion, right? So that really cemented the commercial logic that audiences wanted CG humor anchored by celebrity voices and pop culture references. So every major studio without a Pixar-style pipeline scrambled to make their own, you know, sort of digital menagerie,
Yes.
right? and the only thing that really changed was the type of animals, right? And obviously some of the storylines, bend and otherwise, but, you know, pop culture references, you know, talking animals, wisecracks, celebrity voices and the like. I mean, the other thing that really played a part in this was the democratization of technology. I think there was a lot of CGI production tools had become, you know, very accessible and affordable compared to the 1990s, where almost, you know, big sort of effects houses like ILM almost had a, almost like a patent on it because it was so cost prohibitive and otherwise to try and stand up a rival capability that could produce those same effects. But you effectively had DreamWorks, Blue Sky, Sony Pictures Animation, Aardman, and even newcomers like Vanguard, who did Valiant, or Core, that did The Wild, that could mount like full-scale digital projects, right? The costs for both storage and then rendering, which are two of the largest costs, I think, in these sort of digital animated, which is really, you know, falling precipitously based on where they were, which meant that, you know, studios could actually do concurrent projects, right? So that's why, you know, all these things seem to happen to capitalize on what they thought was a magical formula.
Yeah.
And, you know, started happening at pace over this period. But I'll throw it to you to do a deeper dive as to some of the other elements.
Well, I think, as you said, and like, talking animals is a low risk, globally exportable archetype that we can use because there's no cultural barriers, there's minimal translation costs, but also back in those days of CGI, by using animals, you could bypass that because early human CG models were just terrible, didn't work. You know, you even go back to the earlier Pixar films where, you know, the humans were definitely not human-like, and sometimes you didn't even see their faces, right? So, and then, like you said, post-Nemo, which took nearly $1 billion, every Creature Kingdom, Barnyard, underwater scene was taken, and used. Like you said, every studio had their own animation division. You had Disney had their own. DreamWorks obviously had been building it for a while. Fox was using Blue Sky. Sony Pictures Animation. Paramount had their own. You know, we haven't even scratched on the fact that Illumination probably starts at these years, the creator of the Minions and the Gru films, which came out after this, but I know they were starting to do things in those days. So, like you said, with the costs coming down, they still had to actually justify their costs and so fill their calendars with, you know, films to justify their computer power. But then, again, this was also the time when Disney transitioned out of 2D. Like, you know, their 2D films started to not perform just as well. Like you said, the ones you mentioned there, Brother Bear, Home on the Range, they actually abandoned 2D animation at this point, went fully into 3D, 3D CG stuff. So Chicken Little was their first one, then The Wild, which we'll talk about in a minute. And this is before the Pixar merger back in 2006. So, but yeah, I think as well, I mean, the other thing you're talking about, and again, this is all family friendly, 4-quadrant, like you said, PG rated, safe, money-making animation films, but also you could tie in anything you want with it. Merchandising and marketing, retailers, fast foods, toy makers, anything. You know, we've all, you know, I'm sure in your house, as in mine, there's still leftover frozen lunchboxes, frozen clothing and frozen stuff somewhere in our houses because that's what happened back then and in this point. So, but I think as well, you know, like you said, by 2008, they were starting to get fatigue with this stuff. Maybe it was too many, too fast. Like you said, 27 in 5 years, one every 12 weeks. They started to underperform, diminishing returns. The only ones that were making money were the ones with the strong storytelling. So your Pixars, your Ratatouilles that came out, Wall-E, Kung Fu Panda, those had great stories that brought people in because it wasn't just about the animation, it was about the story. So, you know, and then consolidation happened. So, you know, Disney absorbed Pixar, DreamWorks trimmed its output, and then some of those other independents have folded. And in the case of, as we'll talk about with The Wild, that includes the company that created The Wild. So, but we can talk about that later. So, yeah, but it's created a legacy. Obviously, we've had multiple animated films since then. We've also had adult animated films come through since then as well. That's become a bit of a push as well. So, yeah, there was this was an era that created bulk animation, but also led into solid animation outputs for the rest from then until now.
And I mean, it's incredible, right? Because animation still has quite a run for the next 10, 12 years after this. And especially the ones that focused, you know, the less is more, right? Like the Pixars of the world. They were still extremely successful. But, you know, what I've observed, certainly in the last 5 years, is the lack of a sure thing, right? Like something's broken with the Pixar formula because they haven't had that same level of, you know, success in the last, you know, 5 years that they obviously had, you know, in the first, you know, sort of like 20, right? Now, I mean, obviously nothing lasts forever and, you know, be it sort of, you know, great actors or filmmakers or otherwise, you know, everyone has peaks and troughs. And I think Pixar's going through a bit of a bumpy ride vis-a-vis, you know, their storied history of almost, you know, every film they do is a success.
They were unstoppable until probably 2015.
Yeah, I mean, like if I think of like, you know, some of the films in the last, you know, sort of like, you know, 5 years, like one that sort of like really jumps out at me was Lightyear, right? That didn't really go that well. And their most recent one, Elio, right? I mean, you know, there's a, you know, it's, especially I think Lightyear should have been a lot better than it was. I think Elio had a bit of a troubled production in terms of director's vision changing and, you know, things turning to be a little bit more PC than otherwise was originally intended or whatever the case may happen to be. But it is great to sort of reflect on this sort of like glory time for animation, because even in those, you know, 27 films that I read out, like there's some great stuff there. I mean, obviously we both love Finding Nemo. You know, we both love Shrek 2.
Yep.
I'll declare my hand now. I really enjoyed Madagascar. You know, I'll look at, I mean, Ice Age and Meltdown. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the Ice Age movies. And like, hey, look, even Fox can do it, right? Or 20th Centuries, they're now called, right? Or maybe it's just Disney appendage, I don't know. And then obviously I thought Happy Feet was super solid. Kung Fu Panda, you know, I actually really liked. And, you know, I mean, that's probably it. But there are some like, you know, big hitters in that list, right?
Totally.
There's lots of, you know, maybe mediocrity is maybe too harsh, but yeah, but some ortho rants or otherwise, but there are some that really pop and certainly made an outsized impact. So I think that's actually a really good table set for why these two films kind of like came out as they did. I mean, it is uncanny how similar are that they are in nature. I mean, obviously it's a little bit divergent in that in Madagascar you've obviously got Chris Rock's character as the zebra wanting to effectively go to Madagascar and reconnect with his origin and natural place and otherwise, whereas in the wild the young lion gets it kind of like gets captured or...
Well, I think he just decides to, because he's been told his whole life, don't go into the green containers or don't go anywhere near the green containers, which, randomly, for some reason, at a zoo, there's a container that says Animal Rescue Africa or something.
Yeah.
Right? So when he gets kind of, I guess, pissed off with his dad is the best way to put it, he's like, stuff you, Dad, I'm going to go in the green container, and not realising what it meant. And then whoosh, he's off to Africa.
Yeah, kind of like presses a red button when you should never press it. And which also comes out of like, fear and shame. I mean, obviously he's pissed off at his dad. He feels that he's rubbing his face in it and otherwise. But, as a lion emitting that sound that's meant to be a growl, I mean, you know what, I'd be disappearing myself in pretty short order. But, so I found the voice cast for both were actually pretty good, to be honest.
They're pretty solid voice cast, definitely.
And the one thing, and I know we usually do this a little bit later, so maybe I'll hold on to it, but run us through the numbers, because this is a bit of a stark comparison, right?
Well, yeah, like we said earlier, it's like, whereas we had Disney winning with Nemo, or Disney Pixar winning with Nemo over DreamWorks and Shark Tale, this is the reverse in this situation. So Madagascar obviously came out first. It was released in May of 2005. The Wild was originally supposed to come out in 2005, was actually postponed and pushed back and released in April of 2006. So again, almost a year later. But here's where this is where the disparity happens. Madagascar went wide, 4,000 screens, huge, took 47.2 in its opening weekend, and then went on to earn 193.6 million domestically. Internationally, it almost double that, with a 362.9 million, so it closed worldwide with a rather healthy 556.6 million. Then, because again, being in the DVD age, it took another 52.7 in home video sales. So
huge,
600 million plus there. From a budget of 75 million, therefore it took home 7.4 times for the studio, right? So
massive hit.
Katzenberg would not have been unhappy about that. Then comes The Wild. Again, also did open wide as well, 2,800 screens in April 2006, but its opening weekend was 9.7 million, and it closed out domestically with 37.4. Then internationally, it fared a little better, taking 61.6 and ended up with a worldwide total of just over 99 million. So just under 100, between 99 and 100 million. Now, this had an $80 million budget, so at the time was considered a flop for Disney because it only brought in 1.2 times the budget. It did do actually pretty well in DVD sales, taking another 35 million, but at this time, the film had already been considered a commercial and critical failure. Oh. So, excuse me. So, yeah, a case of opposites from the last time we talked about these two studios, interestingly.
Fascinating. So, and again, kind of coming off the back of Shark Tale, that kind of would have washed any, figurative egg or otherwise off Katzenberg's face, right? So he certainly turned that around. And,
yes.
Champagne corks would have been a popping through the halls of DreamWorks, no doubt.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, let's jump into the directors and we'll get into the voice cast.
Yeah.
So, starting with Madagascar, again, really common for animated films that we mentioned in the Finding Nemo Shark Tale episode. This had two directors, Eric Darnell and Tom McGrath. Now, Eric Darnell was coming off Ants in 1998, and this was his second feature. He co-directs the two direct sequels to this movie in 2008 and 2012. And the last feature he directed was Penguins of Madagascar, so still obviously in the Madagascar extended universe. Tom McGrath was the other co-director. This was his first feature film. He follows this with co-directing a sequel in 2008, and then he solo directs Megamind in 2010 and co-directs Madagascar 3 in 2012, and then solo directs Boss Baby in 2017 and its subsequent sequel in 2021. Now, just quickly on Tom McGrath, I want to call out how awesome I thought he was as the lead penguin. Like, he voiced the lead penguin in Madagascar. He was so good.
Again, this is one of those things where when you talk about that, similar to the co-director of Finding Nemo putting the, let's say, dummy track down as the turtle, the surfer turtle, and everyone loved it so much they kept it. That's the same thing that happened here. Tom laid down the temp track as the lead penguin, and everyone just thought it works so well, so they kept it.
And I think what's amazing is, obviously, in the animated world, the key creatives and otherwise, so be the directors who, really shepherds of the entire story and how it all comes together and is presented, they're so close to the material that they almost, can, embody.
Yes.
Sort of like any character in the story and otherwise. So I guess now that it's happened twice on two different movies that we have discussed, maybe it should be less of a surprise to us that this actually happens.
Yeah, potentially.
So now I want to talk about the kind of like the key voice cast in it before I get into the other cast of Madagascar. And first of all, I just want to say it's amazing, right? Like, what a time to capture some of these celebrity voices. So you've got Ben Stiller as peak Stiller as an actor, right? Yep. He reels off Along Came Polly, Starsky and Hutch, Dodgeball, and Meet the Fockers, all in 2004.
Yeah, right.
He does this in 2005 and Night in the Museum in 2006. I mean, does it get any better for him as an actor?
Yeah.
Right? You've then got Chris Rock, who does this, The Longest Yard, and the first season of Everybody Hates Chris in 2005. So you'd almost argue that, not as a stand-up comedian, but maybe as an actor, maybe this is peak Chris Rock as well.
Maybe, yep.
Then you have David Schwimmer in one of his first roles coming off his 10-season Friends run. And I thought he was excellent as a giraffe. He was great. I think he did a really, really good job. Really well cast as well. Then the other cast, you've got Jada Pinkett Smith coming off small roles in both Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions in 2003, Collateral in 2004. She does this in 2005, followed by Reign Over Me in 2007.
Okay.
And then Sacha Baron Cohen. This was really the first mass appeal movie and one of his first characters outside of the LEG character. He follows this with Bora and Talladega Nights in 2006. And then Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street in 2007. So, this is him just starting. I mean, purely to get on a global platform, really. You've also got Cedric the Entertainer, who's just starting to pop and show up in a lot of movies. He's in Ice Age and Barbershop in 2002, Intolerable Cruelty in 2003, Barbershop 2 in 2004, Be Cool and This in 2005, and then Charlotte's Web, so another voice role in 2006. So, I mean, that's some cast.
Yeah.
Incredible. Now, jumping over to The Wild.
Yeah.
So this is solo directed by Steve Spaz Williams. Now, I'm not going to hazard a guess as to what Spaz stands for, but, clearly maybe not the most PC of nicknames.
Maybe back then it was acceptable.
Yeah, but obviously didn't cover himself in glory getting that nickname.
No, that's true.
Yeah. Maybe mercurial or otherwise you'd use some sort of term. This is the first film he ever directed.
It's the only film I think he ever directed, wasn't it?
No, I don't have that. You're probably right. I just don't have that note. No, he really established his career as a CG animator at Industrial Light and Magic. Now, he worked on some of our favourite films. He worked on The Abyss in 1989. He worked on The Hunt for Red October in 1990. He does T2 in 1991, Jurassic Park in 1993, The Mask in 1994, and then Jumanji in 1995. So research also says that apparently, going back to Jurassic Park, he was literally the creator, so I don't know how much of this is embellishment or otherwise, of the CG dinosaurs in Jurassic Park.
Really?
Apparently.
Well, I also read that he worked on the original Star Wars. He was part of he worked at ILM on the original Star Wars as well.
Was he a teenager?
I don't know. Again, I mean, you've seen the doco of Disney Plus. They were all they
were young.
They were all 18 to 25 when they walked in the door there. So I don't know, whatever, maybe. But but I also found that he never directed after that, but went back to doing VFX stuff.
But I mean, clearly that's where, his talent lay. I mean, some of those films and what he did in some of those films, and obviously being part of a larger creative team working on those films. I mean, they're truly some of the, the hallmark, CGI work. I mean, seminal CGI work in Hollywood really laid the the foundation for the other work that came after it. I mean, The Abyss, T2. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about the voice cast. So Kiefer Sutherland, he does this roughly midway of the original 8 series run of 24 that ran from 01 to 2010. I wanted to say I really liked him as a voice actor. He's got he's always got quite a indelible voice. It's very kind of like cool, calm, but authoritative. Just the right level of, gravitas, I think, to obviously be the Lion King of the jungle. Jim Belushi, he was coming off voicing the woodsman in Hoodwinked. Again, another animation one. Not on the list because there's, obviously an anthropomorphic wolf, but it's more about the other characters, not so much animals, so that wasn't on the list. That was also released in 05. Eddie Izzard, he had a small role in Ocean's 12 in 04. He does this and My Super Ex-Girlfriend in 06. He's got a large role in Ocean's 13 that came out in 07, and he appears in Valkyrie in 08. Janine Garofalo, bit of a mid-career renaissance after constantly working but not really being anything of huge note since 1999. She has like a 15-episode run in The West Wing from 05 to 06. She does this in 06. She has another notable voice role in Ratatouille and appears in one episode of season 5 of 2.5 Men in 07, and then has a 21-episode run in 24 in its 7th season in 2009. Okay. I've always liked Janine Garofalo.
Yeah.
And I thought she does a great job as a voice talent in the wild. So the other cast that I've got down for this is obviously, the always, remarkable, happy to hear him, happy to see him, William Shatner.
Yep.
He does this midway through his run as Denny Crane in Boston Legal.
Which is an awesome show.
Previously appeared in a small role as the Dodgeball Chancellor in Dodgeball in 04. And he was also in Miss Congeniality 2 in 05. Richard Kind, who's bit of a that guy, but most well known for his roles in Spin City and Mad About You.
Yep.
He's actually got 304 acting credits on Internet Movie Database.
He is one of those that guys, but you know who Richard Kind is. You've seen him in everything.
Yeah. So that's really what I got for the vocal talents.
Yeah. There was a really strong cast. Like, you couldn't pick either for being better than the other.
And that's the difference. Like, hey, if you're looking for, which cast had the more celebrity, sure, Madagascar. But it's hang on, who's got greater voice talent or otherwise? I'd actually say like kind of evenly matched.
I literally wrote this is almost a tie.
Yeah,
on who's better or not. Neither.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
So what we love to do, Jeff, is try and tease out or highlight any Aussie connection. Do you have any?
I don't. Do you?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've got nothing for Madagascar.
Okay.
Boo. But I've got 2 for the wild.
Okay.
So first of all, there's a koala.
Yes.
Nigel the koala.
Okay.
And let me get to him in a sec. And then Colin Hay. So born in Scotland.
As in Men at Work's Colin Hay.
100% Jeff, right? The lead singer of Men at Work. So Colin Hay, born in Scotland.
Yeah.
Immigrated over to Melbourne when he was 14.
Yeah.
So Scottish Australian. We'll take him, we'll claim him. And you know what? Men at Work. It doesn't get more Aussie than that.
Absolutely.
He voices Fergus the Flamingo.
Does he?
Yeah. So I've got 2 connections. Now, let me talk about Nigel the Koala. Now, this is I'm not trying to sort of like disparage or besmirch or otherwise Eddie Izzard here, but fuck you. Why can't you find an Australian voice? Like,
I know.
Why is this guy a Londoner? Like, it makes no sense. Koalas, to my knowledge, are only found in one place in the world, and that's Australia. It is. I mean, it's like I'm pretty sure at this point in time in 2006, people can, make the distinction between an Australian accent and an English accent. And like, I didn't find it funny. I didn't find it ironic. I don't know what they were going for. Why couldn't you get an Australian voice talent? And in 06, like plenty of Aussie actors to choose from.
Oh.
Heck, you could have got Russell Crowe.
Literally
enough money at it.
Yeah, you could have got Russell in there he would have been.
Well, you could have got Guy Pearce. I'm just saying, there's plenty that you could have chosen back at that time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So going with Eddie Izzard, and don't get me wrong, his character was actually one of my favourite things for a while.
I've got to say, he's probably one of the best in the whole movie.
And he's seen stealing, right? But I just really wish it was voiced by Aussie.
Yeah. It would have just added to that. He's a koala. He's supposed to be Australian. Like, come on. Yeah.
And he doesn't have to have a super broad Aussie accent. It'd sound like, Jim Jarrett in Wolf Creek. I mean, he doesn't have to sound like that. I mean,
g'day, mate. I'm here as an Australian koala. We don't need that.
Yeah. But, heck, you could have got Paul Hogan. He probably needed some work around that time.
Yeah, there's
plenty of. I'm just saying, there's plenty of different directions.
Yeah,
more Australian directions.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But yeah, Eddie Izzard is absolutely fantastic and pretty much steals the show, I think, in the wild. Like he probably stands out the most, and the other voice actor that I probably would highlight is probably Janine Garofalo. I thought she's actually excellent. I mean, as I said, I really like Kiefer Sutherland, but it's not a showy performance.
No, it's not.
And the other two, and I'm not saying Janine, Garofalo's performance is showy, but both her and Izzard's performance, I think, pop a little bit more, at least for me.
Yeah.
In the wild, whereas I think it's a little bit more even, and I think that maybe what I would say is that I think there's maybe a little bit more sort of harmony maybe between the key cast in Madagascar than there is in the wild, but both, ensembles and both voice acting capabilities are really hard to distinguish, like we've covered.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think they were, either cast, occasionally we talk about could you flip them? What if the roles were reversed? We've asked that question a couple of times. I think, yes, you could do that because they're both so strong. Correct. You could put any of these casts in either roles and they would, again, change the film, but would still work.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I'm not going to dispute that at all. I think that's a good call. So why don't we talk about some of the shots that we enjoyed or scenes that resonated with us? Okay,
so the best shot for me, the most famous thing here is the Planet of the Apes ripoff that they do when he builds I keep calling it the Statue of Liberty and it burns down, and he literally they do shot for shot, admittedly with more wholesome language for kids, of that end beach scene from the original Planet of the Apes. I laughed out loud when that happened. I was just like, that is absolutely fantastic. So I thought that was great. That was probably my biggest laugh of both films. What I liked, there was maybe not more of a scene, is just some of the imagery. I liked how slowly, I don't know if you noticed this, but slowly, as Ben Stiller's Alex becomes more lion than human, because he starts more human, he always stands up. He's always standing on 2 feet. But as the film progresses and he reverts to his natural predator instincts, he goes down on all fours. His perfectly coiffed triangular lion's mane becomes this massive grizzly bear thing, and he just becomes more feral. And I liked how they did that.
Yeah.
Like, you had to know what you're looking for. Obviously, we will notice that more than a 6-year-old watching this film. So that was great. I thought The Wild was it was different in the sense of the way they did things. The animation style was, the animation style was a bit more realistic than that. Like, obviously, Madagascar made a completely stylized choice in the way they did it. They were a lot more cartoony, right? Whereas The Wild went for more of a, not photorealistic, but aiming for photorealistic view.
Yep.
Which I just thought made some of their shots good, because they obviously had, hair blowing and things going through better and stuff like that. Like, it was pretty. But did I have a best scene? I think I like the way I do like the way the wildebeest perform. And again, Patrick Warburton showing up as a voice in there, and having a guide people in the way he dances. That was pretty funny.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I'll start off with Madagascar. Got a couple shots for you. Well, more than a couple. Marty's dream sequence, running with the wild zebras on the plains, right? So it's just this, it's like probably the film's kind of like key fantasy image, like in freedom versus confinement, which is obviously a lot of central to the theme of what's going on. You've got Marty galloping alongside a herd. He's under the blazing sort of African sunset, and then it all snaps back and he's on the treadmill and otherwise. But, the glowing sunset palette, the ethereal lens flare, and then how it just kind of dissolves into sterile fluorescent light. It's just awesome, right? And I think that it kind of like captures, something so central to the whole story of Madagascar. I think it does it extremely well. So really good execution in that. I love the shipping crates tumbling into the ocean. I thought that was just extremely, like shots inside Alex's crate as it sinks beneath foamy waves, and it was just the, the lighting, the composition, I guess the emotion of the scene and otherwise. and there was kind of like, the mirrors of the Voyage and Rebirth kind of sequences that you either get from, Finding Nemo and Castaways, the crash in that. And it was just like really, I think, well done in terms of, all the cues working together, as well as some of the POV work of the animals inside the boxes. I thought that was awesome. The first sunrise on Madagascar was just like Technicolor awakening. It was just a beautiful, beautiful shot, right? Tropical hues, lens flared morning light, gentle camera arc. It was such a tonal shift from, steel and concrete New York to, this hand-painted tropical paradise. I thought that was just exceptionally well done. Postcard-like, as was the final beach shot, right? So, the friends reunited at sunset. Again, it was like, it's kind of like an echo or mirror of Marty's dream sequence for mine, but, as opposed to Freedom, it's friends. And again, so he's not really in isolation trying to share this dream and otherwise. And I think, gives a really nice closure to the film. And it's just beautiful. It was just, warm gradient sky. There's like that soft pullback. So just really, really well done. I thought that was awesome. So if I go to the wild, I would also suggest that Samson roaring on the Manhattan stage. Again, film opens at Central Park Zoo. So there's that parallel. It's a low-angle hero shot of Samson. He's mid-roar, the camera's circling him. He's under theatrical spotlights. His mane is flowing in exaggerated slow motion. So there's a couple of kind of, parallels or callbacks to, Alex when he's establishing his ego, vanity, and dependence on attention in the Central Park Zoo spotlight when he's doing his thing. But again, like there's, I just thought that was exceptionally well done. So I really enjoyed that. There was also, I guess, the other scene where the animals escaped into New York City, right? So there's that, sweeping crane shot following Samson, Nigel, and the gang as they weave through traffic, crowds, and street vendors. It's really quite a kinetic, sort of like scene in terms of them just traveling through Manhattan and, seeing all the things that you expect them to see and encounter and otherwise. There's everything from like, the warm sodium vapor, street light, and, there's, the long takes and the chaos that's unfolding as the, sort of animals are sort of, mixing with humans and, machinery and what have you. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Again,
the cargo ship voyage, the storm and the containers, just that high angle tracking shot gliding along the deck of the freighter as the lightning rips across the sky. I mean, it was awesome. You've got, the rain simulations, the monochrome sort of like blue palette, the reflective kind of surfaces. It was just very, it feels that, hey, we're getting primal now. Like it was just that nice transition.
Yeah.
And probably the final one for me would be the first reveal of the wild. The African vista that you see when the Samson and the crew, they emerge from their crates and they, see Africa for the first time, right? There's that slow dolly out, from the tight crate POV to a massive sun-drenched savanna stretching into the distance. I mean, that's the money shot.
Yeah.
Right? So I thought that was incredible. I mean, there's also probably a very similar kind of like closing shot that they use as well in terms of parallels between the film, because there's also the sunset over savannah, the city skyline fading reflection, there's like that mirrored reflection where...
Well, they literally ride off into the sunset because they get back on the boat and actually, turn the tugboat around. And obviously, because tugboats... Again, I had this as a note. Tugboats have enough fuel to get from New York to Africa and back again. So,
and then Antarctica, right?
That's from Madagascar.
Oh, that's Madagascar. I'm getting confused.
Yeah,
to New York. Yes, sorry, 100%. But again, like that's like you can kind of fall into that trap with these two films because there's so many.
Oh, they're so alike.
They are. I mean, like even as like those closing shots. Like you got crates, containers, boats. Like there's But anyway, so I thought. Like, kudos to, both filmmaking teams. They produced, I think, some indelible images that are postcard worthy or poster worthy and, just great works of art.
Yeah, absolutely. No, they're as you said, it's just separating each one apart is harder than you would think it would be because they are so similar, right? So, other than when we talked about Capote, which was exactly the same film, shot two different ways, this has to be one of the closest ones we've done that are almost like two separate films about the same topic done in two separate ways. But again, developed completely independently of each other.
Again, so crazy that again, this just happens like time and time and time again. And for this one, there's no good reason. Again, it kind of feels like zeitgeist. The time is right. So at the moment, again, maybe the confluence of all the factors that both you and I were talking about that kind of led up to this, it was just the right time.
Yeah.
Right for these films to be created. And clearly, to your point, they had been developed on, parallel tracks and not necessarily known to each other.
Well, interestingly, in my research, Disney had ideas for a film like this going back to 1991, but they'd never been able to quite crack it. And actually Madagascar started as a one-sentence pitch about a penguin rock band in 98 by Eric Darnell. He'd pitched it to the DreamWorks team. So he was developing a film about a penguin rock band that was called Rockumentary. It was basically the four penguins as like the Beatles. So they become famous.
Right.
That was the whole plan. But then they kind of started working on it. They got it around. That was in 98. It was being developed this film, but then they just pulled the pin on it and canned it.
Right.
But then as they started developing Madagascar in the early 2000s, he came on board for that. He took that idea of the four penguins and inserted it as the penguins of Madagascar. So again, they've been around for a lot of years, but again, separately developed, separately put together, separately, independently from, again, two major studios that we know are competing against each other, but still somehow making the same film with the same idea. It's just so close to each other. So, yeah, interesting.
And was there, before we get into maybe just some of the sort of fun facts about production or, behind the scenes or what have you, was there any other thing that you'd like to remark on about either one of these two films?
Well, it was they both had different histories in terms of production, right? So, as I said before, with regards to Disney, so Disney at the time, their agreement with Pixar to distribute their films was coming to an end. This is before the merger. I'm sure maybe there were talks in the background, considering that was 2006, but at the time, they were looking for different alternatives because I think there was maybe a strain between them as an alternative to Pixar, whether it was going to work again, whether they were going to continue. So they were looking for alternatives, and that's when they went to this Core Digital company and actually signed an agreement with them. And so Core created this digital arm because they weren't a digital animation studio as such. They were a digital studio, but more traditional digital stuff. So they created this Core Digital animation part, and this is the one and only film that they made. So because of that, and again, who knows if it's to do with the way the film turned out, the way it was made, or whatever it was, but they never made a film after this, and Disney ended their relationship with Core after this film. So
wow, that's an unhappy postscript, but I guess that happens, right?
Yeah. So, and I think it was, but again, going more deep diving into it, is that Madagascar went through and had its usual production things that animated films have, which is rendering time and animation, and obviously having to occasionally rejig things and do it. Apparently from the get-go, The Wild had production issues.
Right.
So the story wasn't there, the script wasn't quite there, so the characters were constantly being reshaped and retooled. Whole sequences were literally thrown apart and thrown back together again, so they had to be redone, reanimated, re-rendered, taken care of. They were trying to use a whole new system called Houdini, which was an animation system, which was actually a digital system but wasn't designed for animation, and so they tried to tack it into animation, and the animators didn't know how to use it. So
that's an issue.
That created an issue with them, which therefore delayed things. So this film was due to come out in 2005 at the same time as Madagascar approximately. Right. Got pushed by 12 months because of these massive production issues. So there's even a quote that someone on a source on the production said, the entire production was like navigating a battleship through an obstacle course because we were constantly changing and doing new things. That was an actual quote from someone on the source at the time. Yeah. So clearly an unhappy production,
yes,
an uneasy production, and potentially part of the reason why this is not, the great film is not as good as Madagascar, let's put it that way.
Got it. So, the other interesting thing that I observed is never in a twin film, right, have I heard the title of the other film so often. Like, I don't know if you picked up on this, but in Madagascar, they say the wild, the wild, the wild. They say that so often. It's crazy. Because I kept stumbling. I was like, I don't know. Is that an American thing? Is that why they say the wild versus, hey, we're in the jungle or
maybe. The same way we always say we're in the outback.
Well, yeah, exactly. Which, fun fact, no one actually says.
Yeah.
I mean, the Australian equivalent would be the bush, but that is very contained to the geographical setting of Australia.
Yeah.
The wild. I mean, maybe I've referred to it as that, but yeah, it's a strange thing, but it's obviously a term that Americans love because the wild or whatever has been in a lot of different film titles, not just this animated one. But it was for me it was striking to hear so often by the characters in Madagascar.
Interesting.
So, jump into some other elements about each film. So one really interesting one, and I haven't looked up to be able to reference any particular example, but apparently Madagascar, or more specifically, the looks of the jungles or jungle in Madagascar was based on the paintings of Honoré Rousseau.
Okay.
Right?
When you say that, it's very art-like when you like you said, that opening first image of Madagascar, the bright colours, okay.
So I've got some other stuff that Sacha Baron Cohen was obviously auditioning for the role of Julian. Initially, it was meant to be a minor character with only 2 lines. Clearly, he impressed the filmmakers because he recorded 8 minutes of dialogue and they just found his performance so funny that they rewrote the script and made Julian, or King Julian, a much more prominent character.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting.
I found some alternative casting things that were more of considered roles than actual casting things. So at one point for Madagascar, from the get-go, they mostly wanted Ben Stiller was always, and Chris Rock were apparently always their first 2 choices for those 2 characters. But at any one point, they were considering for the role of Gloria the Hippo before Jada, Madonna,
oh wow,
J-Lo,
yeah,
and Gwen Stefani.
Wow.
So they had those 3 were considered there. That was the only casting potential changes in Madagascar. But for the wild, and this is quite a chunky difference, so they at any point they were considering De Niro, Johnny Depp, or Lawrence Fishburne for the role of Samson, so Kiefer's role. Bill Murray or Chevy Chase for Benny, that Jim Belushi ended up taking. Ray Romano and Mike Myers for the role of Nigel, that Eddie Izzard took. And Jennifer Aniston and Frances McDormand were considered for the role of Bridget.
Oh, so I've actually got some other casting what-ifs for Madagascar. So this is for Melman the giraffe, obviously voiced by David Schwimmer, but William H. Macy, Thomas Hayden Church, Sean Penn, Tony Shalhoub, Billy Ray Cyrus.
Billy Ray Cyrus.
And Patrick Warburton.
Now, that would have been a good crossover if Patrick Warburton had become Melman, considering he's the wildebeest in the wild.
Yeah, I've got to admit, out of all of them, Thomas Hayden Church would have, or even like William H. Macy, I would have been okay with. Yeah. I think David Schwimmer is excellent in it, by the way. But I've also got some alternatives for Alex the Lion.
Oh, right. I read that they only wanted those.
So Sam Rockwell, Matt Dillon, Danny Masterton, Gary Sinise, Richard Kind.
Wow.
Wilma Valderrama, Nathan Fillion, Jeremy Renner, Tim Allen, Brendan Fraser, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Michael Imperioli, David Spade, Jason Segel, Ozzy Osbourne, and Matthew Perry.
Ozzy Osbourne?
I mean, this feels half-assed.
Yeah, I was going to say. Right.
So, but then I've also got a bit of a laundry list for Marty the Zebra, right? Now, I've got to admit, Ben Stiller and Chris Rock are fundamental to the success of this film. They are so good and such a great pairing. I actually can't imagine anyone else. But this is kind of like a bit of a fun what-if, right? You've got literally Don Cheadle, Chris Tucker, Fred Armisen from Saturday Night Live, Usher, Cole Hauser, Michael Biehn, John Carroll Lynch, our boy from
from
Zodiac, Cuba Gooding Jr., John Krasinski, Tony Danza, and Ziggy Marley.
Tony Danza? Like, as you said, imagine Ozzy Osbourne and Tony Danza as the 2 mates in this film.
That truly would have been
something dramatically different.
Very different film.
Absolutely.
So I think they nailed that. There's no one else there I replies it. Now, this is my final kind of like casting what if that I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I love 3 of these as an alternative. Like, in all fairness, I've got to admit, I didn't find Sacha Baron Cohen very funny in this at all.
I found that Eddie, if you're talking about where Eddie was compared to King Julian, like Eddie Izzard was the King Julian of the Wild. Eddie's better.
Oh,
and it's
100%.
much better.
100%. Like, I mean, and I'm not, like, as you know, I love Sacha Baron Cohen in some, not all his roles, but in some of them. Like, I was a big LEG fan, but I didn't think it was bad, but I didn't think it was good. And I wouldn't use the superlatives that obviously some of the casting agents would otherwise use when they decided to rewrite the script and, you know, sort of really amp up his character. But here's some casting what ifs for King Julian: Hank Azaria, Patrick Stewart, Christopher Walken, and Alan Rickman. Now, here's what I'll say to you, Jeff.
Wow.
Hank Azaria would have been awesome.
Well, he's done so many Simpsons voices.
Right. Christopher Walken would have been awesome.
That would have been amazing.
Alan Rickman would have been awesome.
Hell yeah.
So in all fairness, like, and I'm not trying to slight on Sacha Baron Cohen here at all, but if they had decided to go a different way, I think that would have been adequately served.
Absolutely. Yes, 100% agree with you.
And usually we don't go that far down the burrow on casting what is, but it was amazing, like, that we both kind of had these, you know, huge shopping lists of who they were potentially going out to, right?
Well, interesting. I've also had Andy Serkis was considered for the role of Larry on the Wild. And they talked to Patrick. Apparently they were considering Patrick Stewart or Gary Oldman for the role of Kazar that William Shatner took as their head wildebeest.
And look, I mean, either one of them would have been great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Patrick Stewart would have been really good.
Yeah.
And again, it was kind of interesting. Like, you know, you have to have someone with a strong authoritative voice that could potentially play a commander in space.
Yeah. Who knows? Well, you know, the UK during the World War II. Who knows?
So I've got another couple of fun facts. Is going back to Madagascar. None of the main character animals, lion, zebra, giraffe, or hippo, are actually housed in the Central Park Zoo.
I found out as well.
There are penguins, however, Jeff.
Yes, I did see that.
There are penguins.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, Madagascar, the one that came out in 2005, is the only film in the franchise to release on VHS.
Really?
The other ones just went straight to DVD because obviously
VHS was dying at that point.
Close to death at that stage. And the only other thing that I have is it was the last DreamWorks DVD to feature cast and filmmaker bios in the special features.
Really?
For whatever that's worth.
There you go. I have a few other bits and pieces about Madagascar.
Go for it.
So when Melman is skating through Central Park Station with tissue boxes or through somewhere with tissue boxes on his feet, that's actually a reference to, because obviously he's a hypochondriac.
Germaphobe.
Yeah. So that's a direct reference to Howard Hughes.
Yep.
So they did it because obviously probably the most famous of all germaphobes who used to wear tissue boxes on his feet because he thought they would protect him from germs.
Yeah.
That's where that's from.
There were no glass jars.
That's right. That's it. Jeffrey Katzenberg is actually the voice of Rico the penguin.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Now, this is the only Madagascar film where Rico does not speak. He only does grunts and squeals.
Right.
But that was Jeffrey Katzenberg did the voices.
Nice.
The original, the in Times Square, when Marty stops and asks the police horse for directions, in the background you can see massive ads across Times Square for HP computers.
Yeah.
That's because HP was the official computer provider for DreamWorks Animation. Oh. So all their computers they used were HPs. So that's why that was in the background there.
That's cool.
And the original 4 animals were going to be a lion, a zebra, a hippo, and an okapi, which I'm not even sure what an okapi is.
I don't know what okapi is.
No, but they changed it to Melman the giraffe because it was more familiar and I understand people will do it.
And a good call.
Yeah. And apparently in the second or third film, an okapi shows up as a secondary minor character. Oh, okay. So they brought it back in.
Yeah. Big fans of the okapis.
They must love them over at DreamWorks there. So now with regards to The Wild, so it's Disney's 46th animated feature, and this is the last one to use the Walt Disney Pictures logo before it became Disney Pictures.
Got it.
Over the castle. So Kiefer Sutherland had to practice that role that he had to do, and he didn't want to do it at home to scare his daughter and his stepdaughter because they were so little at the time. So he would drive around LA in his car screaming and doing lion roars. And he said, I did it for a while until he stopped one day at the light of the freeway and was sitting there and turned over and there was a woman staring at him going...
Wasn't he also in that mid-90s film called Freeway with Reese Witherspoon, and he's a bit of a psycho in that film?
Yeah.
Because I can almost imagine that character from that film is roaring out just before he decides to
there you go.
engage in nefarious activities.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no human face seen in the wild at all. Every time there's a human character, you do not see their faces.
Huh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a nice creative choice.
Yeah. There was the characters of Samson and Bridget were originally going to be called Alex and Patches.
Ah.
So it would have been 2 Alex the Lions.
Yeah, okay.
Which would have been...
So even more conjoined.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there was another Apparently, there's another story version which was deleted where Samson had a wife whose name was Yelena, and Aisha Tyler was the character. Like, she'd
Right.
come in and she'd recorded stuff. But they actually cut the entire storyline because they wanted to show that bigger bond between Samson and the son.
You know, good story decision.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, from my perspective.
And the only other fact I have, which whether it's trivia or fun fact, in Japan, the wild is called Find Ryan with an exclamation mark.
Of course it is. So obviously this is the last Walt Disney Animation Studios film made before Walt Disney Pictures officially bought Pixar, right? But that's kind of not that fun a fact. It's just a fact. The fun fact I found is that this was apparently the biggest animated film ever produced in North America, with over 400 animators put into a large building to work on the film. So I think they're talking about number of people versus budget or otherwise.
Yes. Okay.
So 400 animators. I don't know what the average is, but if that fact is to be believed, 400 is still a pretty big number of, humans working on a, single output in a very specific capacity.
Yes.
So
yeah,
I thought that was interesting. But that was kind of all I had. I didn't have much, and you've covered it quite comprehensively.
I don't really have anything other than that. I think we've covered off pretty much everything about these films. So
ding, ding, ding. Who wins the rematch, Jeff?
It has to be Madagascar. Sorry. It is the more superior film. I think its story is just stronger.
Yeah.
Not necessarily better is probably a harsh word to use, but it's a stronger film, I think. More cohesive and comes together as a overall film.
Look, I couldn't agree more. I think, the sort of the story, the pacing, even the visual appeal of the film, it's just superior.
Yeah.
There's elements of both films that I really enjoy, but Madagascar wins the jungle, Jeff.
There you go, Madagascar.
Or Madagascar wins the wild.
So if this is Rumble in the Jungle, Madagascar wins.
Correct. Hey, that was good. It's always a nice palate cleanser to do an animated pair. What do we have next episode, Jeff?
Well, I'm wondering, we haven't done something like this. Maybe it's time for superheroes. But we're not going to go ordinary superheroes, my friend. We're going to look at two maybe superhero films. We're going to look at Kick-Ass and Super.
Outstanding. It's good to go outside the Marvel and DC universe. So
absolutely.
Looking forward to that.
All right, my friend. See you then.
See ya.
Cheers, buddy.